Mem Zayin Amud Beis. We'll begin 2 lines from the top. Ma'aser Sheni v'Hektish Sheniftu. So continue on. The Mishnah listed the cases where that you are mezamin, and it mentions Ma'aser Sheni v'Hektish Sheniftu, which seems to be a davar pashut. Of course, you have if Ma'aser Sheni was redeemed. So if it was redeemed, then you are now allowed to eat it, and it's permitted. So it's like regular food, or hektish. If something was hektish and it was redeemed, so now it's like chula. So it would be permitted. So what is the chiddush over here? We're talking where there's a redemption, but it was not a full redemption. It wasn't a redemption with all the halachas. The halacha over here is when the owner, when he redeems it, he has to redeem it for the face value, for the keren, for the full value, plus a fifth, which ends up to being a quarter. It's a chaimish. Now we're talking in the case over here, he redeemed it, he paid the keren, but he didn't pay the chaimish, so it's not a full redemption. Nevertheless, it's not makiv, it's muter. It's considered food that is muter and mizamnin. That the chaimish is not ma'akiv, it's an obligation, but it's not ma'akiv the redemption. The redemption is still valid even without it. Or if the servant, the shamash, he ate a kazayis. So if he ate a kazayis, a pshita, so of course then he ate like anybody else. So of course you can be mitzaref him for the zimun. For the Gemara, you might think that the shamas, that's not called a kviyas. The shamas is serving. He's not sitting, he's eating while he's serving. So he's not sitting together with them at the table. You might think that that's not a kviyas, and therefore you cannot be mitzaref from v'zim. Kamash malan. So the way Rishonim speak out, kamash malan, since that's the normal way he eats and he serves, that's considered a kviyas. It doesn't mean to say that for others it would be a kvias, but for him it's considered a kvias. And if he ate a kazayas, they can be masarif and vazimun. Vakusi mazaman Allah, you can also join in a kusi. So there's a machloikes whether kusi, whether they were geri emes, geri rice, where they have a din of gerim or not, if they're considered yidden or not. Now, even if you consider them to be geri emes, but they don't keep all the halachas. So, in fact, the Gemara mind lo yeh amaretz. You shouldn't consider him no better than an amaretz. V'tanya im zamin al amaretz. You cannot join together an amaretz for zimun. Now, Taisus points out that was in those times that they did not join together. Talmud Chacham and amaretz was not. They didn't have mezum together. They were not mitzvah from v'zimun. In later times, however, so as not to be merachek the amaratzim, and so that they should not be pirish, it was instituted that we are mezam forms. But this is talking originally. So why is a kusi better than a Yisrael amaretz? We happen to be talking in the case of the Mishnah where it's a kusi who happens to be a Talmud Chacham. Rav Amar, he says, "Afilu teimu kusi amaretz." Even if it's a kusi, it's amaretz. V'hachaba amaretz the rabban. What is the definition of an aretz? Our Tana is defining an amaretz like the sheet of the Rabbanan, the Polygaleh, the Ramer Askinan, who argues Ramer. So what is that definition? As more bring down the Brisa, the definition is someone who is not careful to be mafresh, trumas, and meisers. Now the Kusi, they were careful. So in this regard, he's not considered an amaretz, and therefore you can be mezamin with him. What's the definition of amaretz? Called she'ino eichel chula b'tara de Ramer. Ramer says if he's not machmer on himself to eat chulin b'tara, chulin can be eaten with intuma. It doesn't have kedusha. But Talmidei Chachamim were very careful so as not to have tuma with truma and kochim. Even their chulin, they ate b'tahara. So if a person does not adopt that chumrah, that stringency, is not considered a Talmud Chacham, he's considered an amaretz. That's what Ramer says. But however, Chachamim, they say no, the definition is if he's not careful in being mafresh, the maisres. The hani kusoi, and however, these kusoi, they are mafresh appropriately. To be mind, because they're very careful on Teresh B'Ksav. they didn't accept by the Chachamim, the drashas of the Chachamim, Torah Shebal Peh. But Torah Shebiksav, they are careful, and Hafrosha's Meisers is written beferish in the Torah, so they were careful with that. They're not considered an Amaretz in that regard, and therefore our Tana holds Mezamnin. Whatever they kept, those things that they kept are even more medakdek than Yisrael. So on Meisers, they were medakdek. Therefore, according to the Shita, you could be mezaman with them. Ton Rabban, so we mentioned this machlokes of what is an amaretz. Now we bring down the Bryce other opinions of how to define an amaretz. Belezer says if they don't say Krishma in the evening and the morning. Rabbi Shua, he says if they're not meneach tefillin. Ben Azai, he doesn't put tzitzis on his baggage. Rabbi Nosson, he doesn't have mezuzah. Rabbi Nosson bring Yosef, he has children and he doesn't raise them Talmud Torah. He doesn't educate them in Talmud Torah, send them to schools, at Chadorim Yeshivas. Acherim say, even if he learns Mikra and he learns Mishnah, but if he doesn't learn Gemara, he's like Shimish Talmid Chachamim. In the days before Gemara was recorded, Shimish Talmid Chachamim means he has a discussion with the Talmid Chachamim, with the Rebbeim, to elucidate the Mishnah, to explain the Mishnah, the Talmud, which is what we call Gemara. Nowadays, it means if he doesn't learn Gemara, even if he's a Mikra and he can be an expert in Mikra and Mish, but if he doesn't learn Gemara, he's considered an Amaretz. He said that's halacha. Rami Bar Chama lo yasmin aled Rabbi Nashe bar Tachlifa. He did not join Rabbi Nashe bar Tachlifa in a mezumin, even though the Tanei Sifra v'Sifrei v'Helchasa, even though he learned, but he didn't learn Gemara. He was Mishamish Talmid Chachamim. He considered him to be an Amar. It's like the Shita of Acherim, and he did not join him. He was not Misaref him for a Zimun. Ki nach nafshe the Ram Bar Chama, Ram Bar Chama is nifter. Rav said, Loi nach nafshe the Ram Bar Chama, Ela Dolei Azman, Arab Menashe bar Tachlifa. Because he did not give him this covet, he slighted him, and he embarrassed him this way. That's why his life was taken away. Why did he do anything wrong? So apparently he acted properly, because seemingly the Rabbi Nashe bar Tachliva was not Mishamish Talmid Chachamim. No, Gemara says Shani Rabbi Nashe bar Tachliva the Mishamish L'Rabbanan. The Rami Bar Chama, who the Loidaka Basrei, he really was Mishamish Talmid Chachamim. Rabbi Chama was not careful enough to examine it thoroughly. Lishna Achrina, a different lashon, that in Chanami, that really he was not Mishamish Talmid Chachamim. And in that regard, it was correct. However, he would not be considered to be an Amaretz because the Shamash Shmaitza Mipumaid Rabban Vegaris Lukatsur Rabbanan Dami. Because even though he did not engage in the discussions with the Rabbanan in the base matter, so in that regard, he was not Mishamish Talmid Chachamim, but he accepted their explanations of the Mishnah, and the Maskona's explanations of the Mishnah, al-pi their Masu Matan, al-pi their Maskonas of the Gemara, and therefore he should be considered in this regard a Surva Midrabanan, a young Talmid Chacham. Now the Mishnah says, however, if a person ate tevel, and Ma'aser Rishon loinit l'masa, then you cannot be mezamin with him. In fact, the more tevel pshita, it's macholos asuras. It's macholos asuras, so it's not mevarach, it's menatz. That's a double portion. Why does the Tana have to tell me that? Then Yeshua speaks out even more that it's pshita, because if you told me that demai you can, well, it's only because it's demai, but it would be tevel, obviously you can't. So it's pshita. Gemara says leitzricha betevel talmid rabbanan. We're not talking about tevel deraisa. Tevel deraisa in a chanami would be a davar pashut. We're talking where really min haTorah you do not have to be mafish the maises. Heichidami, what's the case? It's sheina nakav. It was planted in a flower pot that was not perforated. It doesn't have a hole. It's not considered growing from the ground. If it's not considered growing from the ground, min haTorah, there's no chiyuv to be mafish maises. It's midrabanan. Nevertheless, even though it's not midraisa, you cannot be mazaman with this. And Ma'aser Rishon, if it's Ma'aser Rishon where we were not mafresh The truma, well, of course, if you're not mafresh the truma, it's macholos asuras. You cannot be mazamin. You cannot join with the zimun. Frakti more pshita. The more answers. Leitzricha kigoyin shegdim bekri. We're talking a case where higdima bekri, it was already processed. The grain was processed. The owner, the balabais, was not mafresh truma. He did not mafresh the truma, and he instead gave the mafresh, the meiser rishon, to the Levi. So the Levi had the meiser rishon, and truma was not yet separated. Now over here, we don't say, like we mentioned before, over here we don't say that the Levi only has to be mafresh the truma's meiser and not truma. In this case, he does have an obligation to be mafresh the truma. That he might have said, well, what's the difference between this case and the case where it's not processed, where it's the gidulim, where it's the givolim, where over there we say the Levi does not have to be mafresh the truma, and even if he's not mafresh the truma gedola, you can be mazamin. You might have said, well, what's the difference? That we answered, no, this is idgin. This has already been processed. It's called dogen, it's called grain, and therefore the truma gedola must be separated. So even if the Levi got the meiser rishon and truma gedola had not been separated, there still is an obligation, and you cannot join with the zimun macholos asuras, and you cannot join this person with a zimun. Meiser sheni says a meiser sheni that you were not poided. Well, if you're not poided, then it's also to eat it. You cannot eat the meiser sheni outside of Yerushalayim without redeeming it, without being poided. So of course you cannot be mazamin pshita gemara tzricha shenifta. I'm not talking that it was not redeemed at all. It was redeemed, but however, to kill chosan, but it was not done properly. Meiser sheni ki goin shaparo l'gabe yasima, and meiser sheni, it's talking where he was redeemed, but not with a minted coin. It was redeemed with a coin, but was not minted. So it was with a ingot or a slug, but it was not a minted coin. So it had value, but it was not considered a currency. We learn you bundle up the kesef, but it says v'tzarta, which also we darshan kesef sheish alav tzura. It has to have a tzura. It has to be minted. It has to have engraved on it, like a coin, the figure of a, whatever it is, the monarch, etc. It has to be a minted coin. So we're talking, yes, there was a redemption, but since it was not with kesef tzura, it's not a proper redemption, and therefore there is no zimun. Hektish, similarly, hektish shechilulu, there was a redemption, but not a proper redemption. Shechilulu gabi karka, v'lo yipanda b'kesef. It was redeemed with land, had value, but not Rahman Omer v'nosana kesef v'kamla, and it says that it has to be kesef v'kamla. It has to be dafka with money and movable currency, but not with karka. But shamish because the servant, the waiter, the shamish that ate less than a kazayis. Well, of course, pshita, of course. If it's less than a kazayis, there's no zimun. It's not called a chila. There's no chiyuv of benching. It's not zimun pshita. The more answers this is really, it's really self-evident. But I did the Tana Reisha kazayis, Tana Seifa pachas mikazayis. Just for consistency, the Tana said in the Reisha kazayis, he contrasted this case with less than a kazayis. And with a goy, with a nachri, there's no same. In fact, more pshita. Of course, there's no benching. He has no chiyuv benching. More answers. We're talking about a ger. It's not talking about a nachri, a complete nachri. There was a partial geras. It was a ger who was mol. He had mila, but not tvila. He has not completed a complete ger until he has both. Unless he does that, he's considered to be a nachri, and therefore we're talking. The chiddush is that this is also called a nachri, and there's no chiyuv benching, there's no zimun. You also cannot join for zimun for women and children and avodim. A cotton that's mutal is a cradle, a young cotton. You could be mizamen. Fracting more, what do you mean you could be mizamen? We say you can't be mizamen. The Homer Shubin Levi, the Homer Shubin Levi, Afal Pi Shamar Katan Mutal Barisa in mizamen love. Even though it's true, we said that a young child was in a cradle, you cannot join for zimun. However, that's only a zimun for 3. But if it's to join him, the 10th person for a minyan of 10, then you could join him. For 3 you can't, but for 10 you can. Well, similarly, he said, if you have 9 and the 10th is an Eved, now even though the Eved can't be the 3rd person, but he can be the 10th person. Frankly, I'll ask you a question. He came to shul, he didn't find 10 people for a minyan. He set his Evet Knani free. He was Meshach Rabbi Shlim Elasor, and that made up the 10th person. Shichrin. So, frankly, Gemara Shichrin Loi Shichra Loi. You see, he had to free him. That you can't just make him the 10th man and Evet a 10th man. He had to set him free. Gemara says no. Trey Itzrich. There was only 8 people. So if it would be the 10th, he would not have to send them free. But they needed 2 people. So Shichra Chad v'Nofim B'Chad. So he was Meshachar 1, now they had 9, and the 10th one he did not have to be Meshachar. The Evet could be the 10th person. But they needed 2 people, so 1 he had to be Meshachar. So now the Gemara asks, well, how could he do that? A side question. You're not allowed to free a slave. If a person frees an Evet Kanani, he's over on an essay. You have to subjugate, they have to be in your service. You can't set them free. The Gemara says the var mitzvah shiny. Yeah, but here was for a mitzvah. For a mitzvah, it's mutter. For the Gemara, what do you mean mitzvah ba'avera? It's a mitzvah ba'avera. You're doing the mitzvah for the minyan, and it's through an avera of setting the evet free. Gemara says mitzvah the rabim shiny. Mitzvah and the rabbim, it's different if it's a mitzvah the rabbim. Here it was to the benefit of everybody that they had a minyan. Then the question arises is that it's a mitzvah derabim, so how does this work over here? Why is this not mitzvah ba'avera? Furthermore, the mitzvah that's in question over here is a mitzvah of minyan, which is the rabbanan, that you need 10 people for a minyan is the rabbanan. Freeing the slave, the isser of freeing the slave is the raisa. So the Rosh learns is that there is no isser, even a mitzvah derabbanan, a mitzvah derabim outweighs a private isser. So over here, it's doichet, and therefore it is mutter. Others learn the Bach, there's an arichas over here of the Bach, others learn, and some Sefer explains, others learn that it's not a question of a mitzvah derabim being doichet, the isser of the yochid. The issue over here is that the le'olam bem ta'avodo, the isser of freeing a slave, applies only if the slave is being freed for no ultimate purpose. If the purpose is a mitzvah derabim, then the isser doesn't apply. So this would not be the same case in other isurim. Here, the Torah says le'olam bem ta'avodo, you're supposed to have the slave work for you. But that's only, the reason is that because the slave, that's the purpose of the slave, and that's where he belongs. But if there's going to be a mitzvah derabim, then the isser of lo'elam b'am ta'avodah doesn't apply, because it's not for a no reason or for an equal reason. It's for a greater cause. Then the Torah doesn't mandate that you have to work the slave, because there's a greater benefit by having the slave free. So the Isser doesn't even apply. Another memra of Yeshua ben Levi, Bomer of Yeshua ben Levi, Loilam Yashkim Ar Lebesa Knesses, Kadesh Yiske, V'yimne, Imasar Rishenim. A person should always get up early, and he should be from the first 10 that come to the shul. So we're talking about a minyan, etc. It's a big inyan to be from the first 10. Even if 100 people come later, he gets the schar of all of them. In fact, more schar kulam, I mean the reward of all of them. They give him the schar corresponding to the schar that all they get. His schar is equal to all of their schar. This inyan to come early to a minyan, meaning even if he's coming on time, but there still is an inyan and very choshev and schar, great schar reward to be from the first 10.